should begin, and if people arrive in the waiting room, they will be entering the presentation. So hello everybody, we are in the second seminar of the series of introduction to game-based approaches, organized by the International Advisory Board of the TGfU Special Interest Group. So thank you everybody for making the effort to assist, and I have to remember that this will be recorded. Ellen will be in charge of the slides. Please, Ellen, next. So as I said, welcome everybody to this seminars. We really hope you find this helpful for your professional development, and also to use this seminar for future professional development. So next slide. So this is the 5 critical components for learning to teach and coach game-based approach, and there are 5. We decided that after long talking, that this could be a good 5 steps to introduce yourself into the game-based approach. So next slide. During the first seminars, we saw a general view of the 5 topics, and today we are in the seminar 2. We will address topic 1 and topic 2, tactical concepts and game modification. Next, please. Today presenters are representative, as I said, members of the IAB, Naoki Suzuki from Tokyo Gakugei University in Japan, Francesco Sgrò, University of Enna in Italy, Gutiérrez from Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul, Brazil, Kanae Haneishi, Western Colorado University. All of them are representative in the IAB of the countries they are working in. Myself and David Gutiérrez from University of Castilla-La Mancha, and current chair of this committee. So next slide, please. So today we will address 2 topics. They are really big topics, but we try to make it in briefing and make it clear information, which that information that we think are the most important to begin with game-based approaches. So we will address topic 1 and topic 2, and then we will present some suggestions to follow up in your using other seminars that are will be available in our web, and at the end we will have time for questions. In terms of questions, we encourage you to write them in the chat, and we will then use that question at the end of the presentation. So let's begin with topic 1, tactical concept and problems. The game-based approach is based on the conception that games are not a set of technical tools, but is mainly it's a set of tactical problems that have to be solved. So next slide, please. So we will address in this term that what is tactical and problem-based teaching and learning. So if we consider games in this way, we need to understand how is that that problems really build the essence of the games. So we will address this. As a consequence of this, we will explain how games can be categorized in categories, and then after that we will see different explanation for the 4 categories. Next slide, please. So what is a game, and what is different from all other kind of sports? So games present problems of what to do and when to do it, and not just how it's done. So it's not only the motor skills, but is important when you are practicing a game. In this sense, games within the same category have common tactical elements and employ similar strategies to achieve similar goals. So we can, if that kind of games that can be grouped in, depending on the tactical elements and strategies, are grouped in categories that we will see now. So understanding and grouping sport games according to tactical problems should be the first step for a teacher or a coach to begin to try to understand and use a game-based approach, because the rest of the elements will depend on this understanding, and we will based on this concept. So next slide, please. So we can make a parallelism between traditional learning with traditional coaching and teaching games or technical approach, and a problem-based learning with game-based approach. So when we have a traditional learning, the player or the learner is told what they need to know, memorize, that in sport will be practice it, and then go to the real problem. When we are in a problem-based learning, firstly, we address the problem, identify what we need to know, practice, and master to solve it, and then learn how to apply. But all the time you are applying thinking and practicing in the real problem. And that problem is a game, what we call a game, or as we will see, modified game. So next slide, please. So as I said before, if we are thinking in games on having on account the essence, which is the tactical problems, we can group them in 4 categories: target game, striking and fielding, net and wall, and territorial or invasion games. Each of these categories can be categorized into subcategories. We will see examples of them, and we will see different problems that are, and you will understand, hopefully you will understand why are they grouped, and then understanding that one of the main goals of this classification is to allow transfer. When you learn the full category, or you are practicing one game and transfer to another in the same category. So let's move to categories, and I will give the word to Kanae, and so go on. They will present, our 4 presenters will present each of them one category.
Thank you, David. So I am going to now talk about the tactical problems, focusing on the invasion games. So before we go into the tactical problems, the definition of the invasion game. So definition of the invasion game, so invasion games are the games in which the aim is to invade an opponent territory and score a goal or points. These are typically fast-paced games that need teamwork in order to control the ball, keep possession, move into a scoring position, and prevent opposition from scoring. Teams share the same playing area as they attempt to both score and prevent the other teams from scoring. So invasion games can be divided into the 2 categories, which is an end zone games or goals games, or 3 categories in which include handballs, football, and stick and ball games. So these are the example of tactical problems in invasion games, such as in the offensive side of the invasion games. So such as keeping possession of the ball, penetrating the defense and attacking the goal, transitioning from defense to offense, creating a space in attack, using space in the attack, and then moving to effective space for support. And here is an example of tactical problems for the defensive side of the invasion games. Hold on. Such as defending space, or defending the goal, or winning the ball, or covering the teammates. And the next slide are the examples of tactical problems for the restarting play of the invasion games, such as beginning of the game, restarting from sideline, restarting from end line, and the restarting from violations such as free kicks. And this table is an example of a relationship between tactical problems and then movements, off the ball movements, and then on the ball skills. And then these are the examples of level of tactical complexity for soccer. Or the last slide, that last table was also for soccer as well. So just so you all know that these slides, the videos, will be shared after the webinar. So if you want to look at this table closely, you have access to that after the webinar as well. So now we are going to move into the tactical problems in striking and fielding games.
Okay, so I will explain the tactics common to striking and fielding game and its development. Striking and fielding game is a game in which offense and defense are clearly differentiated, and the players compete against each other by alternating between offense and defense. The players compete to see who is faster at picking up a ball kicked or hit into the field by the attacker and carrying it to its destination, or who is faster at running to reach its destination by the attacker. In other words, the competition starts when the attacker delivers a ball onto the field and ends when either the ball or the runner reaches destination first. Okay, next slide. So that's the tactical concepts of the striking and fielding games are for the attacker to aim to get the ball to a reasonable location to advance and to contrive to allow his or her teammates, including himself or herself, to advance. For the defender, it is to devise positions to prevent bases from being advanced and to devise ways to get the ball to its destination more quickly. These offensive and defensive efforts are striking and fielding game tactics. Okay, next slide. So in phase one, the attackers use simple delivery methods such as hitting, throwing, kicking, and rolling to make time to deliver the ball and advance. While the defenders compete to get the ball to its destination faster than the attackers. Therefore, the tactical problem for the attacker is to determine how to make time to advance the base, and for the defender to determine how to cooperate in how to quickly get the ball to its destination and to properly demonstrate their skills to do so. In the next slide, in phase two, for the attackers, it would be good to increase the number of the options for advancing the bases and making decisions. How about how far to advance? And for the defenders, it would be good to compete with their teammates to devise ways to work together to send the ball where and how it should be delivered. Thus, the tactical problem is to demonstrate effective ways to cooperate with teammates while making appropriate decisions based on the situation. Okay, next slide. In phase three, The defensive player will compete to clearly define their roles in catching, delaying, and covering the bases according to the situation with an awareness of positioning, and to take appropriate roles according to the ball delivery and base advancement status of the attacking team. The tactical problem is to be able to participate in the game while making the tactical adjustments required by the complexity of the offensive and defensive decision making that is created by the remaining bases. Okay, next slide. In phase 4, the attackers are determining how to deliver the ball and make decisions in order to advance their teammates and advance their own bases, while the defenders compete to prevent runs from scoring. The defenders compete with each other by devising how to send the ball out with consideration for the situation of runners left on base and the number of outs in order to prevent runs from scoring. In this game, players learn how to participate in the game while planning a rational strategy that fits the situation. Okay, next slide. In phase 5, participants compete in games by designing the offensive and defensive game plans based on the characteristics of their own team members and those of the members of the opposing team. Here, the tactical problem is to be able to plan and execute strategies with clear reasons based on the self-understanding and the understanding of others. Okay, thank you for listening. Next.
Hi, everybody. My name is Gui. I'm from Brazil. I'm going to talk today about tactical problems of net and wall games. So first, I will talk about these tactical problems. The main goal of net wall games is to send or hit the ball or a shuttlecock, for example, to the opponent's court with the intention of making it difficult for this defender to return the ball or the shuttlecock, or that the opponent does not return it. So with that, there are some tactical problems. With this main goal, we have some tactical problems about these games. First one is keeping the rally, maintaining the rally. That is making the game happen, passing the ball or shuttlecock to the opponent's court or space. This is the first tactical problem. The other one is setting up to attack or create space to attack, moving the opponent to find an empty space to win the point. And the next one is to win the point or to hit the ball or the shuttlecock or the rubber ring, for example, where the opponent can't return. And to prevent the score, we have the defending space and defending against an attack. Next slide, please. And now I'm going to show some examples. For example, in the attack phase, I can, for example, setting up an attack and create a space for the next point, the next hit. So this is an example of how can we create this space in a net wall games where the ball can bounce on the court, like a tennis, for example. Basically, I try to move the opponent from the center and open another space to win the point on the next hit. In this case, the player tries to use the angles to open space and attack in the other angle, in the other part. Next slide, please. Now, this is the same example of tactical problem, but in another game. This is an example of how can we create space to attack in a net wall games in a game where the ball or the shuttlecock cannot bounce on the court, like badminton, for example. In the same way as before, I try to move the opponent from the center and open a space to win the point. In this case, I can use a short hit, open a space in the back, and hit next on there. The next hit on this open space. Next slide, please. And now here is an example of defense. So basically defending space on the court. The idea here is to close the opponent attack's angle. In games where the ball can bounce, I always try to stay in the middle of attacking possibilities, as we can see in the pictures here. I always try to be in the center of the angle and try to defend the space, defend the possibilities of attack. Next slide, please. And in games where the ball or shuttlecock cannot bounce, I need to be approximately in the center of the court so that I am in the middle of the opponent's attack possibilities. That's it from the tactical games programs about net and ball. Thank you.
Thank you, Gui. Hello, everyone. I'm Francesco from Italy. And as my colleagues did before, I start my presentation by discussing about the definition of target games. Target games accounts for all the game where a player's goal is to place an object as a ball, as a project, nearest to a target area to obtain the best score as possible. Target games can be divided or can be associated to three different typologies of game. The first, unopposed games, such as golf or bowling, where each player performs an action independently of the opponents. The second typology of game is opposed target game, such as bocce or curling. These games account for the games where each player's action can affect the other's play's performances and vice versa. For example, I can hit a ball to move away from a target area the opponent's ball. The third category of target games is moving target games. These games are not normally used in a formal context, sport context, but they can be used in non-formal contexts such as physical education. They differ from the others because the target is not fixed, but each participant's body is a potential target for the opponents. Examples of these games are dodgeball or dodgeball. Next slide, please. In these slides, I will introduce to you the tactical principles related to each typologies of games. We start from an opposed target games. The tactical principles related to this typology of games are orientation and positioning, which means adopting the correct body orientation before a hit in respect of the target. Trajectory and power, which means choosing the right course and the right power for a throw. Throw its selection, which means choosing the best typology of it respect to the target that we will reach with our throws. And finally, projectile placement, which means laying the ball as close to the target as possible. For what concerns opposite target games, we can see in the table the same tactical principle that I have discussed before, but we have three principles in addition. The first, collaboration, which means helping teammate to push his or her ball closer to the target area. Protection, which means placing a ball to protect another ball that is nearest the target area. And finally, opposition, which means throwing a ball against an opponent's ball to keep it away from a target area. For what concerns moving target games, the tactical principles are strictly related to the player's motion. So the tactical principles related to these games are be balanced and ready to move, use a variety of fakes for avoiding opponent's ball, and in this respect, we need to changing speed and direction quickly, and we need to keep constant visual contact with the opponents for avoiding their hit or their throw. Next slide, please. Okay, in this slide, as my colleagues did before, I try to show the tactical problems related to the target games. Tactical problems, as in invasion or in network games, can be divided into scoring and preventing scoring. For each tactical problem, we can say in the table different characteristics according to the level of tactical complexity. Level 1 is related to one player and opposite target games. Level 2 is related to 1 versus 1 and opposite target game. Meanwhile, level 3 is 1 versus 1 opposite target game. For each tactical problems, we can identify several of the tactical principles described before. For example, for what concern moving to closer target, we can associate to this tactical problem tactical principles such as orientation and positioning, such as trajectory and power, and throw its selection. Of course, each teacher or each coach can use this table for understand which is the best tactical level of complexity that is adequate for his students or for his or for our players. Then each teacher can use this table and to develop the best teaching process or the best coaching process for improving the learning of the performances of their students or players respectively by supporting them in game-based situation. That's it for target games.
So thank you, Francesco. So let's move to topic 1, game modification. So let's remember this pyramid. We have now learned about tactical concepts and problems. So once we know about them, we are ready to know how to design rich learning situation for learning games. So the games modification will be the second topic and the second step to understand for the teacher and the coach to prepare a game-based approach. So next slide, please. So in this topic 1, we will address why to modify games and use modified games, because when we modify a game, it's very simple. We call them modified games, which are that's context situation, real game situation that we are practicing with the same essential elements of the game, but we modify for the purpose we will see in a moment. And then we will move again for examples and how to modify games in the 4 categories. Next slide, please. So the why has 2 purposes. Firstly, is to make it playable. So when we do that, we call it game representation. And the second purpose, we modify to focus the game in the teaching goal of the lesson or the situation. We will see how to use the modification of structural elements of rules, number of players, playing area, equipment, and game goal. So next slide. So let's explain a little what is the modification by representation. I have to remember that this is, I said this, the first purpose is to make it playable, to allow players actually play. So both modification by representation and modification by exaggeration are part of the 4 TGfU pedagogical principles explained by Thorpe, Bunker, and Almond. And these 2 pedagogical principles are for designing modified games. So modification by representation is the simplification of games structural elements while maintaining the same tactical structure. So the pedagogical purpose is to create the developmentally appropriate game-like scenario that allow learners to play the game according to the characteristics. So actually play. So it's different to be in the game than to play the game. And that's something really important to understand, to watch, and to analyze by the teacher and coach. So we see in the pictures, the formal game would be tennis, where we have a representation, a modified game at the right. It's a mini tennis, but we have also different other games that are part of the net and wall categories that decrease a lot the difficulty in terms of technical requirements, but keep the sense, the tactical of the game, and what are the main elements, the tactical problems we saw before. So that those contexts are much more easy to play, to really play for kids, and doing that, really learning the tactical problems and by practicing to master the full game. So next slide, please. So the second purpose of game modification is to focus on the teaching goal of the lesson. When we do this kind of modification, we call it modification by exaggeration. We have here 2 examples. For example, in soccer, we can modify and exaggerate by putting more goals and designing different rules, and on the handball team with a very specific situation. But we will see examples of this category later. So the pedagogical purpose is to emphasize particular information, make it clear for the student how to achieve a certain action, but not only to make it clear, but to increase the chances of making this situation to arise during the game. Because if you want to practice and learn something, we need to practice several times. And it's very difficult to, in a full game, we have like a very situation that we have in the pictures. So we need to make it to be possible to learn it, and to have the opportunity to practice for all the learners different times during the game. So next slide, please. So using this picture for Bunker and Thorpe, we see the big yellow circle could be the full game. We can represent it is a smaller form of the game, but it still is a circle. It's the same. The sense is still the same. Or we can exaggerate one part of the game, so that would be exaggeration. But normally, those games that we propose in our lessons are both. So it's not something different. We can have a modification game that are both by representation and exaggeration. So that would be the normal modified games in our lessons. So in the next slides, our presenters will show you some examples for each categories, both by exaggeration and representation. And this have in mind that this is very closely linked with tactical problems. We have to have in our minds that we're modifying to understand the game, and doing so, understanding the tactical problems and trying to learn them. So next slide, and
Thank you. So thank you, David. So first, I will explain how you can modify the invasion game using soccer as an example. So based on the lesson objectives or the age groups, and then depending on your student or player, you modify. First, we talk about the modifying rules, modifying the games by changing the rules. So first, based on the lessons, teacher can modify the rules. For example, if you want to focus on the quick decision making, possession of the ball and passing, you can limit the touches to max of 3 touches. Then the student will not be able to dribble the ball, and then they are encouraged to make a quicker decisions with the ball, and then they're focusing on passing part of that game. If you want to, if your students are struggling controlling the ball, you can add defensive rules such as cold, or warm, or hot defense. So cold defense is the students are allowed to touch. Students are not allowed to touch other players and stay an arm length away, and no tackling, and only interception is allowed. And then hot defense is the 100% defense, and the warm defense is somewhat between. Teachers should make specific restrictions for warm defense as well. So depending on the lesson objectives or your students or the player, teachers can add additional goals or restriction lines or areas. For example, if teacher can use those outside lines, which is coming up here, and other rules like the ball must travel the outside channel before taking a shot, which emphasize students to use the outside area. Because as you know, when you're teaching soccer unit, students tend to only use the center of the field. So these adding rules and the area emphasizing students to practice to getting wide area. So you can also modify games by modifying a playing area. So teachers can also modify playing area based on the lesson objectives. Should you set up the field small or big? Or wide or narrow or short? Square or triangle? So for example, if your students are having a hard time controlling the ball, teacher can make that field bigger so students have more time and space. On the other hand, if you want to develop students' quick decision-making and accuracy of the pass, you can create a small space where students are forced to make a quick decision with less touches on the ball. If the lesson objectives is something related to shooting or finishing or movement in front of the goals, you can move the goal closer and make a shorter field, so there are more opportunities for the students to take shots. And then you can also adjust the number of the goals or location of the goals. So for example, if you want students to work on spreading the field and switching the field, you can make 2 goals on each side. So each team has 2 goals to attack and then 2 goals to defense. So they can work on changing the point of the attack. The teachers and coaches also can modify games by changing the number of students or players. So based on your students or players' skill level, grade level, age, or lesson problem, such as tactical problems, teachers should decide how many students should use each field or each grade. Make sure that not all limited students are watching the game. So no or limited students are watching the games. If you have 5 students watching the game, maybe create another field. So create more field if necessary. So again, if you have less skilled student, you should have less student in an area. So each student have more time and space to control and make decision of what to do with the ball and execute the skill, which is more the pictures below. And it is important for teachers to continuously observe the game and then make the adjustments as necessary during the lesson. So when you observe a lesson and you see that players are struggling, make that field bigger or take the players out of the field and make another field. So there will be less players on the one field. If you are a sports coach and you also need to make an intentional decision of who plays what teams, if you want to develop defensive, offensive or defensive teamwork, you may want to put offensive players together and defensive players together so they can work on certain players together. On the other hand, if this is a physical education lesson where various levels of students are in the class, it is highly recommended to mix up the teams so the student can work with students with various skill levels. And then also teachers and coaches can modify the games by using a different kind of equipment. So based on the student's skill level, oh, sorry, it's a typo right there. Lesson objectives, a teacher can modify the equipment such as using different balls, different size of the balls, different materials of the ball. So if you're doing soccer lesson, you can use smaller ball or bigger ball or softer balls or like harder balls. If you teach goals, you can change the size of the goals, bigger, smaller, materials, and in size and height. So the picture in the middle is the basketball. If you're teaching basketball unit to lower skill level, like younger student, you may want to lower the basketball. So then let's see. So this is an example video of invasion modification. Let's see. Okay, so the main goals pursued with the modifications are increase of participation and the reduction of the tactical complexity. So it's much simpler. And the next video is another example of tactical, the game modification for invasion game, which is soccer. So the main goals pursued with the modifications are the focus on the getting the goal, was the tactical problem. So that as you can see, and as David mentioned already, that the players have more goals to shoot on from the different angles too. So these are some example videos that the coaches and teachers can modify the games based on what they are looking for in the particular practice. So now we're gonna moving on to the fielding games. Oh, if I can. There you go.
Hey, so I am going to explain the game modifications for the striking and fielding game. So striking and fielding games are those in which offense and defense are clearly differentiated, and the game is structured by the ball delivery task and the base running task. Baseball and softball are typical games that we are familiar with. Hand baseball and kick baseball are also typical examples of striking and fielding games. Also, the technique of delivering the ball differs between these games. The examples include cricket and pesaparo, which differ in the way the two tasks are combined and performed. It is important to use these competitions as a clue to modify the game to fit the students' actual situations. Okay, next slide. The key to game modification is to devise ball delivery tasks and base running tasks. Concerning the actual situation of student skills and tactical understanding, modify the game by considering what kind of the ball to use and how to deliver that ball according to what we want them to learn, as well as what size of field to deliver the ball and how many players to protect the delivered ball, etc. So, for example, the ball delivery task becomes easier if the ball is not moving. The difficulty level increased if the ball is sent out using a bat, racket, or other equipment. The difficulty level is even higher if the ball is in motion and the player has to hit it back and send it back out. The type of ball can also be changed. It is necessary to select the type of ball that matches the competition you are aiming for in the game by paying attention to its size, weight, material, degree of bounce, and so on. Furthermore, if the space to send the ball out is large, it will be an easier challenge for the attacker. But if the size of the court or the number of defenders is increased to reduce the space that one person has to defend, the attacker will have a more difficult time. So it is a good idea to modify these perspectives to properly so set the ball delivery tasks. Okay, next slide. So next is a base running task. In this game, players compete to see how quickly the defense or the runners can reach the destination of the ball delivered by the attack. Therefore, the key to game modification is to consider where to place the destination. First, it will be important to select where to place the common objective in relation to the attack and the defense, so that the competition between the attacker and the defender is undetermined. Sorry, it is possible to have multiple destinations and vary the score according to their difficulty. The competition can also be complicated by including the relay points on the way to the destinations. As players compete in this way, modifying the game design to fit their realities and gradually complicating the tactics. Their understanding of tactics will improve, and the skills they utilize will also increase. Okay, next slide. In summary, there are 3 key points to game modification. Please see it. I don't have enough time this time, so please see this slide after this seminar. Thank you for your listening.
Hi again. So now I'm going to talk about the game modification, game representation in netball games. So now I will exemplify and explain modifications by representation here in this category. The main purpose of this modification is to make the game possible or playable. Let's take an example of the tennis modification. Imagine a class of children who are just starting to play tennis or to learn tennis. How can I use the game to teach? Surely children wouldn't find it difficult, would find difficult to play. So I need to make the game playable for them. How? Changing the game, using softer and slower balls, which allow children time to reach the ball and adjust the body and can hit the ball. I use a smaller court because the official court will require a lot of power for the kids to hit the ball to the other side. I can also modify the rules, changing, for example, the counting, which can be very difficult at this age, or even allowing, in some cases, children to, sorry. And another thing I can do is to allow children to catch and throw the ball, because hit with a bracket can be very, very hard for them. I also can change the rackets. I can modify the equipments such adapter racket. The picture here shows a racket made of cardboard, which we call here a random racket. It looks like a palm and make it easier for the child to the kid to hit the ball. And the kid could use in both hands. So this is an example that what we did here and with the students. In this slide, so we can see these pictures of hand rackets that we create during the classes. These rackets can be made of cardboard and customized by each student, as in both pictures as an example. They work like a palm and make it easier for children to hit, and they can hit with both hands in the game. Next slide, please. Here is in this other slide, you can see some other ways of adaptation. In the first picture, there is a foam ball being used for adult women's beginners. Normally, the foam ball is used for kids in the first stage of learning, but we can also use for beginners, adult beginners, like we use it here. Notice that the picture of two women playing with each other without a net, which was another modification made to make the game playable for them. In another picture, it's possible to observe a tennis class for children in a mini court, like David showed us before. The third picture shows a group of young teachers playing in an adaptive form by representation. A rubber band divides a school court, forming 5 mini courts. The ball used was also adapted, lighter and slower. It was also bigger ball. We just not use small things. We can also use bigger things, like this ball here. The blue ball, it's bigger, but it's lighter and slower, allowing beginners time to adjust and hit the ball, because the students here doesn't have expertise in tennis. The next slide, please. In this slide, we can see a video of students playing with their hands in the first video. They hit the ball with their hands, and it's a big ball, and in a game with a wall, because I only show examples of net games, but we can also use about wall games. And then in the other video, the students playing by catching and throwing the ball. Realize that they try to throw the ball in the empty space to make it difficult to return. It's the next goal of the games modification by representation. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to explain a little bit about another way to modify the game, the modification by exaggeration. The goal is to modify the game to emphasize something we want to teach. Let's look at this first example, a table of tennis class in which I use two tables, one next to other, to make the empty space more evident. So students can see the open space and hit them and try to hit the ball in this open space. For me, it's very easy. Okay, but for beginners, it's very it's not so easy. It's not so obvious to see and to throw the ball or to hit the ball in this open space. The next slide, please. In this other example, athletes need to create space with the serve. It is worth noting that this is a more difficult game, but this game was used with a more advanced students, young tennis players. The goal was to serve open in order to make it difficult for the receiver to return, who should catch the ball with his hands. After the service, the player should run to a zone on the court. The receiver, after catching the ball, should do the same thing. Whoever arrived first in the area won the point. With this, the server should serve in order to move the opponent out of the court and gain time to reach the zone. So this is exaggeration to use the serve to open space here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gui. Now I will introduce to you two different examples of modification for target games. The first is based on exaggeration principles. We apply this principle to a target game with the aim to improve decision-making, strategy, and throw skills. The original game we choose is a beam bank toss game, which accounts for a player throwing a toss from a line to an hole to one of the holes placed in an inclined table. Each hole has a different color and each hole has a different score, as you can see in the slide. By means of this game, the learners develop throw skill by aiming for a target with accuracy in terms of both direction and distance. In our proposal of modification, we use the exaggeration principles to improve the previous described skills and to make players much involved in the game. In this respect, we propose to use two teams composed by 3 players for each team. Each player can throw 4 different shoots, and the team that the first reaches 16 points win the games. The game's field can be modified according to the picture in the slide. In the game's field, we can find 7 different color circles. These circles are placed in a semicircle position. Moreover, in the field, we can find 4 different cones: red, blue, yellow, and green. The cones are placed in a crossway. The player starts by throwing a ball from the red cone, and then they move in a clockwise direction to the blue, to the yellow, and to the green, respectively. For each throw, a player has to decide if throwing the ball to the nearest circle, as the blue ones for the player in the red cone, But in this way, in this hypothesis, the blue circle has the lowest point. Or a player can choose to hit the ball to the longer circle as the circle in the first throw. But in this way, he can have a much difficult throw, and the score is highest. According to these changes, for each throw, a player can improve his decision-making skill, the ability to perform a hit from a different perspectives, and he can improve his strategy by choosing the easier or the hardest. Next slide, please. Now, by moving forward with a much more complex scenario, we can move from a simple and opposite game, as shown in the previous slide, to a complex activity, moving target game. For this purpose, I will introduce a competitive situation by using the dodgeball, and we can modify this game by using a representation strategy with the aim to make it playable and to involve much the people in the players in improving their ability to throw a ball against an opponent. Can you change the slide, please? So now I will show you the changes we propose to modify the game. The original game, we have two different fields in the same, two different courts in the same field. We propose halving the size of the field by tracing a neutral zone horizontally on the classic field. In this way, we can have two little fields where the players can play. The green with the number 1 in the slide, and the yellow with the number 2 in the slide. The second change is related to the ratio between the number of athletes and the available balls. In the original game, we can have one ball for each player. In our proposal of modification, we can have 2 balls in addition to the original ones. In this way, the opportunity for each player to throw a ball is increased. Finally, we propose a change in the rules about the way to take out an opponent from the field. In the original game, I can take out an opponent by hitting a ball against them, and an opponent is take out from the game if he is hit directly. We propose a change. We can take out an opponent from the game also when he was hit by bounce throws. In this way, we can hope to make the games much playable, and we can involve the players much in the games. Thank you very much for your listening. David.
So
okay.
Thank you, presenters. Yes, I have my microphone shut. So after watching and listening these examples, both for tactical problems, which is topic 1, and modification, topic 2, and I remember that these are the 2 first steps we consider are the first a teacher and a coach has to master to begin to use a game-based approach. We give you some examples of suggestion about all the webinars you can use to increase your knowledge about the topics of today, like a tactical focus versus skill focus categories, or some webinars addressing specific categories like invasion, net and wall, and target games. Some of them are webinars. You can find all of them in our web. And some of them are examples, small tutorials for specific games that allow you to see different examples. So next, please. So questions. We have 2 questions in the chat. First question is from, both are for Farid. The first question is about questioning, which is even though we can talk about this is the topic for the next seminar. So that will be really good if you keep in mind and watch the seminar and give this this question. Anyway, we don't have I will ask firstly if anybody has a question about the specific topics we have addressed today. So this could be a good opportunity to develop some elements of the seminar today. So you can both raise your hand or directly open your microphone and talk, or write in the chat. No? So, well, let's talk a little about
sorry.
Farid.
Sorry.
Yes?
Hi.
Yes. Go on.
I just wanted to, yes. Hi, everybody. Just wanted to say that listening to the seminar reconfirmed what I teach, what our emphasis is on when it comes to the GFU model, the GBA. So it was nice to see the things shared that we're teaching in our program, very parallel to our ideologies. And so thank you for that. It's nice to see.
Thank you. Any other comments or question? Okay, so Farid wrote that if in indirect teaching approach, the power of question are very crucial. So his question is it better to utilize open-ended or close-ended questions? So anyone in the presenters want to answer this? Okay, I can do myself. Okay, so I completely agree, and as I said, this questioning is one of the 5 topics we need to understand and master if we want to use a properly game-based approach or teaching games for understanding. So what depends if we use open or ended questions? That depends of if I have to choose one, I would say open-ended. Okay, because we have to encourage players to think in a diverse way, and but in any case, it's a continuum, because we have game situations that are really close. For example, in target games, or if we are in a situation that we have, one question would be, if you don't have the opportunity to move with the ball, will you pass the ball to a covered teammate or somebody who is free? That's a very ended question. So it's a very clear situation, and very clear answer will be, and also very simple. So will be at the very beginners. So that's very simple. So it will be closed question. But we are, for example, also we are in an invasion games. We have several teammates and opponents, and probably one answer is better, but it's not the only one. And that will be depend of the skills of the teammates, your own skills, so and different other elements. So that would be much better to find if they think about different questions. So let's open it. So what would you do and why? So that's an open question. So we can use both. So recommendation, if you have to choose, make an open-ended, but I will say that both has to be used to address the full game complexity. Okay, and so Farid also asked about, in coaching context, how to integrate game-based approach with physical elements properly by considering intensity and volume. Can you give us some examples? So Kanae, do you want to answer this?
That.
You are in coaching,
yes,
so
I'm a soccer coach, so I can use soccer as examples. I'm hoping that you're asking question in the invasion game situation. But for example, in a soccer situation, if you want your players to get more physical intensity, you make a field bigger in less, and they have put less people in there. So they have more space to cover, and they have to move around. And in addition to that, when you're talking about game-based approach and physiological component, game-based approach actually proven to be better compared to the traditional coaching approaches, teaching approaches, in order to develop the physical component that actually require for the games. So for example, because the players are playing soccer games, right? So they're actually developing the cardiovascular, they're playing like a soccer. So like they're sometimes developing a cardio fitness, but then as well as they're sprinting, right? And then they're cutting, right? So like the physical perspective that they're actually developing the physiological component that's required for the actual games. So then in terms of volumes, if let's say it is a day before the game that you don't want your players to get too tired, right? And then you can actually put more players in the one field or make it smaller field, so that they play more like smaller side games. They're not running around crazy, so they're more using in here rather than like using the physical aspect. So that's how you modify it as a coach, using game-based approach in relation to proper what was the word used? Okay, proper physical elements. That I'm hoping, I hope that I'm answering your questions. So I'm using only the invasion game as an example, but I'm sure you can use a similar concept in the other game categories as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Kanae. I think that was really clear. So anyone has want to do a last question? Okay, thank you very much. I remember this is the second seminar. We will have a third and a fourth to address the next topics in our professional development of game-based approach. Thank you very much. Good night, good morning, and so on. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone.